This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Nick Abbot.
Good evening, this is Nick Abbot on LBC, taking your calls on the Western reaction to the Ukraine conflict. If Vladimir Putin uses chemical warfare on the Ukrainian people, would it be time for the West to intervene? Your calls in a moment on 0345 6060 973. First, let's talk to Daniel L. Davis, a foreign policy analyst, former lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army. Good evening, Daniel.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. So they found the Russian soldiers with gas masks. The Russians are accusing the Ukrainians of having a chemical weapons facility. Does it sound like a prelude to an attack of that sort?
It certainly could. We just got to be honest about it, because Russia has used that tactic in the past. They, to a certain extent, used it when they launched their initial invasion itself. And the fact that you're seeing them with gas masks, that's a very disturbing development.
It might be something even more disturbing, which I'm reading about now, is the potential for staging some sort of attack at the site of Chernobyl. Have you heard about that?
I haven't heard about that specific one, although obviously they've been in control of Chernobyl for quite some time. But I just got to tell you, I take a lot of these with a grain of salt, because there is, we got to be honest, there's misinformation and disinformation really given out by both sides to try to make themselves, most appealing to external audiences. And some of the things, even from the Ukrainian government, has turned out to be quite false. But I look at it as, would Russia benefit by doing something at Chernobyl? And it would be catastrophic for their own interests. So I tend to not think they would. But man, you can't put anything past them. That's the problem. All of these are plausible, and it's until we see what happens, we can't refute anything really.
Well, on that, is there something in the world is saying that Russia is going to perhaps launch a chemical attack or hobble Chernobyl to create a bigger disaster? If the world is saying that out loud, is it in an attempt to perhaps stop any thoughts in that regard in the mind of Vladimir Putin?
Yeah, absolutely it is. And I don't think it's without justification, because the United States was very outspoken and open about a lot of its intelligence, and especially in the final 7 or so days before the invasion, being very specific about what Russia was going to attempt to do and how they were going to do it. And pretty much that's the way it came out. And I think because of that, the overwhelming global response to Putin's illegal attack, not just the West, but really a global response, has just been remarkable, bigger than I think anybody in the West thought, and certainly bigger than Putin thought he was going to get. And so if we do that same kind of thing here, so if anything does happen with whether it's chemical or nuclear, and then something happens later, all it's going to do is bring yet more condemnation onto Putin and just strip away any deniability.
Vladimir Putin has actually launched a chemical weapons attack on British soil twice, to our knowledge. The Alexander Litvinenko polonium killing and the Salisbury poisoning. And he got away with it both times. We didn't do a single thing about it. So do you think that perhaps that has emboldened him?
I don't think so, because those are different categories of things. That's really different. A version, the ones you're talking about there, not that they're any less bad, but the means of assassination or attempted assassination in some of those cases. But this is an overt warfare thing where his troops are all around there, and even he would have it. And the condemnation of the global, because the scale, not just one person, but it would be potentially a region. It could be hundreds or even thousands of people. And God forbid a Chernobyl issue where, that stuff could drift God only knows where all over Europe. And, that's where things get super dicey for Putin if he overplays his hands.
Now, a lot of people have been making critical remarks about the Russians' tactics in the war so far. What do you make of what they've been doing and how they've been doing it?
Yeah, I think that when I look at the number of troops that we assess them to have started this operation with, somewhere between 175 and 200,000, it just from a military historic perspective and from a military analysis perspective of the size and scale of the operation, they don't have enough troops really to do it right. So if you don't have enough troops to make an invasion of that sort, he'd probably need triple the number he had, probably closer to 750,000 or 1 million, to be able to take that many cities, to knock out all of their military capability. And he just doesn't have that much. So you have to compensate, and it looks like that they have consciously chosen to compensate by going heavy and hard on the destruction capacity, on the rocket fire, heavy artillery, air power, even some drone strikes. So it looks like they're using heavy on that, which doesn't require as much personnel. That's a military tactic, but it's one that has catastrophic implications for the civilian population, and we're seeing that in spades.
The troops that he sent in don't appear to be out of the top drawer. Is it possible that these are just essentially kids in uniform that he's sent in to make a mess, and he's got his actual crack troops, the real army, they're waiting and ready to go?
Yeah, I think that is possible, but I'm becoming less by the day to believe that is the case, because I've seen so many just really, I mean, you can't even call them rookie mistakes, but just almost just absence of knowledge of basic military tactics, much less that the strategic or operational levels, have just been abysmal in many cases. It's been a bit mixed. They're doing some things in a good way, if militarily speaking, but like that famous video from just yesterday, where it showed a large number of tanks just sitting on the street in an outskirts of Kiev, getting shelled from above. I mean, that's a mistake that a second lieutenant who's, barely even been in the Army wouldn't make, by having them bunched up and just sitting like that. And yet they did. And that's, 2 weeks in after many other mistakes they've made. So it's making me question just how tactically capable is the Army.
Has it made you question what his end game is? Do you think he actually wants to take over a functioning country, or just create a wasteland?
Yeah, no, actually, I don't think that I've seen nothing that dissuades my mind from what I think his end game is, which is he wants to affect a political change in Kiev in terms of their foreign policy orientation. I think he'd be happy to get rid of Zelensky, but I think he'd also be he would be willing to keep him in place as long as he got his declaration of neutrality and a commitment not to join NATO. Now, in one respect, you'd say, okay, well, that's just a piece of paper. He can sign it and, next year repudiate it. And I think that part of that is the reason why, the second reason why we see so much destruction, both of the Ukrainian military as well as of a lot of civil infrastructure. Because if Zelensky is eventually compelled to sign such an agreement to end the war, which is a legitimate possibility, and the Russian forces withdraw back to the Donetsk area and back to Russia, then the Ukrainian won't have the capacity, to go back on that, because it'll take them so many years to rebuild their military. And during that time, Russia's also going to have to rebuild their military, but they're going to maintain that power and ability to come back at any time. And I think that's his end game, because Putin does not want to control Ukraine, despite what so many experts say they believe, because he wants that buffer. And if he owns Ukraine, there's no buffer. Right. He wants a buffer between his territory and NATO.
Just finally, what should the West do if he does use chemicals or nukes?
Yeah, I've been going back and forth with this, and I actually was on one of the American TV networks yesterday, and the hard truth, I have not changed at all. We have to stand firm and not escalate. As bad as it would be, we have to keep this contained within the boundaries of Ukraine, because here's why. If we go in there and all of a sudden now the war is expanded because we hit Putin, we bring military force from NATO in there, now it's a NATO war. And now Putin may be launching missiles into Warsaw, or maybe into Paris or Berlin, and God forbid, it could escalate into a tactical nuclear strike, which is not out of the question. And now then we've taken a catastrophe into a humanitarian nightmare of epic proportions. We just can't do it.
Thank you so much for your time. Daniel L. Davis, foreign policy analyst, former lieutenant colonel in the United States Army. So you've perhaps read the stories about the possibility of a gas attack. There is this story that I was reading just before talking to Daniel about Chernobyl. The Mail reports, double danger at Chernobyl. Ukrainian hostage's daughter warns that the plant is held by Russians who have no clue about nuclear security protocols, as Kyiv intelligence claims that Putin's forces will fake a terror attack at the site of the Chernobyl reactor to try to blackmail the world. Well, at that point, it's going to be quite hard to do nothing, isn't it? Even if it does result in wider warfare. How is it possible that one man is doing this to 6 billion people? 0345 6060 973, text 84850, email nick@lbc.co.uk. If you're on Twitter, it's @LBC. Your calls next on what should the West do if Russia uses chemical or nuclear weapons.
This is LBC with Nick Abbott. Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet @LBC. Text 84850.
0345 6060 973. So you probably read the story that Ukrainian forces have seized gas masks from Russian troops following warnings from the West that Vladimir Putin could use chemical weapons. He's used them before, of course, here in this country. The Ministry of Defence shared images of the captured equipment, which also included World War II-era helmets and an Ushanka hat, showing apparently the dilapidated state of Putin's rundown military. That's the story that we're reading. I mean, what the truth of the rundown military is, it's difficult to tell from this distance, but let's take it at face value. Western and Ukrainian leaders have issued dire warnings that Putin is preparing to use chemical weapons. What should we do in that event? There's also the even worse story, like I was saying just before, about the possibility of them engineering some sort of nuclear disaster from the various nuclear facilities that exist in Ukraine. There's about half a dozen that I'm aware of, about 5, 6, something like that. They've already shelled the one in Zaporizhia, the one in Chernobyl, the site of the disaster, of course. That is apparently being run by people who don't know what they're doing. First call, West Midlands. Hello, Ranjit.
Hello, Nick. Thanks for taking my call.
Ranjit.
Yeah. Okay, this guy has been planning all the USSR since 1978, to be honest with you. You know, when they got beat by the Afghans, yeah? And now the genie's out the bottle. You know, when they say after a war, everybody sits down on a table to sign peace agreements. But this guy has put all that out the window, and I think we've got no choice, right? And I hate what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say we have to go to war with him, because the messages that Joe Biden has given him is that we're not going to interfere are totally the wrong messages.
Well, it's not just Joe Biden. It's all of the leaders in the Western world have said the same.
They have said that, Nick, but look at all... I mean, how can any person bomb a maternity ward?
Well, I was talking to Bill Browder, the oligarch hunter, last week, and he called it before it happened. He said that's precisely what Vladimir Putin does. That's his strategy, his normal way of playing these sort of incursions. He bombs hospitals first, then fire stations, said Bill Browder, and by that method you sap the morale of the people that you're invading. But it doesn't appear to have sapped the Ukrainians' morale, as far as we can tell.
No, he's pushing it further and further, right? You know, like when people were asking Jeremy Corbyn, when will you press that red button? He says, I'm not going to answer, because if you lay out parameters of when you're going to do something, then the other person knows how far to push you. Now, the whole of the world needs to tell Putin, you've got 24 hours to turn your tanks around. If you haven't, we're coming in for you, right? That's the only way it's going to happen. He is pushing his luck to see when are we going to retaliate. And we are going to have to retaliate sooner or later, because the genie, unfortunately, the monster is out of the bottle, right? Unless, I mean, the people have been going on about this, that somebody from within his own ranks will shoot him, yeah? I don't think they will, because he's got that much propaganda going on, right? And if you look at it with an open mind, Nick, as you always do, yeah, there are two sides to this story, but Putin's taken the wrong way out of doing what he wanted to do, because he did ask Bill Clinton if he can join NATO, and they said no. So NATO has been encroaching on him, kind of, strangling him, which is wrong. It's wrong.
NATO doesn't encroach on anyone. If a country of its own volition wants to join NATO, then that's a matter for it. NATO doesn't invade that country. That country decides to join. It's completely different. But thanks, Ranjit. 0345 6060 973. Al texts, I think if Russia uses chemical or other weapons, NATO must enter. It's shameful that NATO is still being overcautious. At least Poland should give Ukraine its planes. Why bother going through the Americans to deliver them? NATO is being silly. The only reason that Vladimir Putin can get away with all this is that, of course, we don't know if he's actually completely insane. Because if he is, then the threat of all-out thermonuclear war is valid and real. I mean, if he actually wants to, at best, live the rest of his life in a bunker, then I suppose we can take him at face value. Or perhaps he just wants to go out in a blaze of glory. Except there would be more blaze, no glory. That's the reason why we are hesitant, because we don't actually know what the state of his mind is. But it doesn't appear to be that great. 03, and again, it's just, I mean, I know galling doesn't quite sum it up, but it's utterly galling that one person can hold 6 billion people's lives in his hand. Eastbourne, hello, Roy.
Hello. With the Russians turning to shelling other Ukrainian cities today, it seems clear now that their strategic objective is Ukraine, not just Russian-speaking Ukraine. So what we're going to find in a week or a month's time is that NATO forces and Russian forces will be face-to-face on the Polish-Ukrainian border. And that is, I mean, the very reason that we're not doing anything at the moment is because we don't want them to be face-to-face. But I think that's almost inevitable. Now, what I think we should do now is that NATO should do what they're designed to do on a protective measure, is that they should go into western Ukraine, say 50, 100 miles, as a buffer zone. It also creates an enclave for Ukrainians to go to, but we should be very close to these nuclear sites if things start looking really awkward.
Right.
And that's as a defensive measure, not an offensive measure.
Yeah. The but in all of these arguments is, but Vladimir Putin might just think that that's us attacking him and do what he's been threatening to do all along and let off the nukes.
Okay, well, if he's that mad, bad, or whatever, he is going to do it whatever the circumstances. I mean, he doesn't need to convince himself that he's threatened to do it. If that is on his agenda, heaven forbid, he's going to do it come what may. Well, let's get ourselves into a position where we can stop it if we can.
It might not be on his agenda, but it might be just a sort of a last up yours to the world if it looks as though he's going to fail. Because I'm sure that looking weak, looking like a loser is the absolute antithesis of everything that he stands for. I mean, he's a man who can fill entire calendars of pictures of himself with his shirt off doing sports. He's got this face to maintain. So if it looks as though he's actually going to lose this, the might of Russia has been crushed by tiny Ukraine, well, where would he go from there? He's probably looking at dying one way or another. He's almost certainly looking at being considerably less well off than he used to be, being as how his wealth is held for him by oligarchs who, if Putin is not in power, might not want to take his phone call anymore. So how's he going to get his money back? So it looks as though he's gambled everything on this. Now, he probably didn't think of it like that when he started out, but that's the way it is becoming apparent, that this is now a gamble for everything that he's ever worked for. And if he fails, he's just going to say, OK, fair enough. Or is he going to, make everybody pay? It's just actually staggering what's going on. It's just, I'm virtually speechless. 0345 6060 973. Liverpool. Hello, Kevin.
Hello. Well, I think his biggest mistake what Putin's made is he never went into Finland or Sweden first. That's his main objective, because it's because of climate change in the Northwest Passage and the Russian Passage opening up. That would be the greatest thing for commerce, and that's what he's been after. That's what he's after. So Finland and Sweden should be brought into NATO as quickly as possible, and don't even allow like what he did when it was in Georgia, wasn't it? When Georgia was promised that they would become part of NATO, he mobilised his troops and went straight away in. I think it was a place called South Astaria or something like that. But this is a mistake. He knows that's his aim. That's what he wants. He had the fleet off Alaska a few years ago, observing what was going on, because they know for commerce and the amount of what we use shipping for commerce getting around the world, that's what he's after. He's a raving lunatic. He's an idiot, and anyone who backs him up on their lines, because we will have a Nuremberg trial at the end of this for crimes against humanity, and anyone, all his henchmen, they will all be held to account.
Well, you got to catch them first, and that's going to be the big problem, isn't it? Because none of them will probably ever leave Russian territory again.
Yes.
So,
well, hopefully they'll kill him. They'll turn on him and kill him, because he's or incarcerate him. He's a lunatic. He's an old man. He's a raving lunatic. He hasn't got his full faculties against him. I believe he's saving his best troops to behind. But you know what I mean? The generals, the people themselves, the whole country. It's not the Russians. The Russians are all right people. It's just that the regime, or he's controlling them, and the lies he's telling his own people. He imprisons people. He does all kinds. And I know a lot about NBC. I was trained in it. I was Portland down trained. It's an absolute disgrace. He's a tyrant, and he's got to be silenced as quickly as possible, because he's not going. Don't give him a chance to stop and inform the people of Russia of what's actually going on. The fighting on. Look, he's just a tyrant. He's a thug.
All right. Thanks, Kevin. 0345 6060 973. What should the West do if I was going to say unthinkable, but it's not anymore, is it? If the almost despairingly inevitable happens and he resorts to something much worse than he has used already? 0345 6060 973. Coming up, we're going to find out what the American reaction is to the latest from the Ukraine conflict with LBC's Simon Marks, and I'll take more of your calls.
Nick Abbot on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
Let's cross to Washington, D.C., where we find Simon Marks, LBC's US correspondent, who's joining us now. Hello, Simon.
Evening, Nick.
So, what's this story about Joe Biden personally killing this Polish jet deal?
Well, the Polish jet deal has really been an embarrassment for the Biden administration this week, because as the Biden team has relentlessly claimed that there is total unity galvanizing the transatlantic relationship between the Biden White House and governments of NATO and Europe, it's become apparent that there is unity within the Biden administration itself, and tremendous strains throughout this week with the government of Poland. The Poles, as you know, wanted to send MiG fighter jets to Ukraine on the basis that they had some to spare. The Ukrainians obviously desperately need them, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that these Russian and Soviet-era fighter jets are actually planes that their pilots already know how to fly. They wouldn't need any additional training. So the idea was, and this was green-lighted last week on television by the Secretary of State Antony Blinken, that the Poles would send their MiG fighter jets to the Ukrainians, and the United States would then replace the fighter jets that the Poles were giving to the Ukrainians with some brand new fighter jets that the US would conjure up from somewhere and send to Poland. We knew it was in trouble on Monday because the Pentagon spokesman indicated that conversations were still very, very early stage and didn't quite go so far as to saying that Antony Blinken had said far too much on television and gone much further than the Pentagon wanted him to go. But it became apparent that there was a problem. But then this thing has played out all week long here, with the Pentagon on Tuesday describing the whole idea as untenable and thinking that they had shut the door on it. But on Wednesday, when he was meeting with Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, who's been here for the back end of this week, Antony Blinken, despite the fact that the Pentagon had described this deal as untenable, indicated that he still thought that there might be some way of making it happen. Again, that night, the Pentagon angrily shut the whole idea down, arguing that they believed that this was too cute by half, that Vladimir Putin would see this as a move essentially by NATO, remember Poland is in NATO, to enter the conflict with Russia. And so suddenly the whole thing was off, and the Vice President, Kamala Harris, who happened to be going to Warsaw, found herself having to deal with this sort of diplomatic standoff between Warsaw and Washington, because the US had indicated it was surprised when the Poles said, look, we've got these fighter jets and we're ready to go. Let's get them on their way to Ukraine. Why they were surprised by that, I've no idea, given that the Secretary of State on television last Sunday gave Poland the green light to move ahead with the whole plan. Absent from this debate publicly has been the President of the United States and also his National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, who appears largely to have evaporated. I mean, we've not seen hide nor hair of him all week, which is curious given that he's supposed to be the one that's really running the US response to the situation in Ukraine. But I think it became evident that within the White House and within the National Security Council, they were siding with the Pentagon. They are very, very wary and understandably wary of finding themselves on the slippery slope towards a war with Russia. And they argued that this fighter jet deal was going to take them down that slippery slope. The difficulty with all of this, though, is, first of all, the US, as you know, has supplied, box loads of Javelin anti-tank missiles to the Ukrainians, some of them arriving in Kiev just a matter of hours before the Russian invasion began. So why draw the line particularly at these fighter jets, given that it must already be obvious to the Russians whose side the United States is on in this war, because they keep shipping the Ukrainians lethal weaponry. The other difficulty with it is that it demonstrates a lack of coordination within the Biden administration that has led some foreign policy analysts that I've been talking to this week, some former US government officials, who say that they think that the Biden administration actually played everything pretty well throughout the first full week of the invasion, but this week things have gone off the rails pretty badly, and it remains unclear what is the line, what's the tripwire. Is it an attack on NATO? Is that the line that then results in the US absolutely having to enter the conflict? Is it the use of chemical weapons? I mean, President Biden said today, yes, there would definitely be a US response if the Russians used chemical weapons in Ukraine. His press secretary yesterday didn't seem entirely convinced about that. She was prevaricating at the White House podium yesterday. So there's this uncertainty about, where do you draw the line in terms of providing, in this case, tangible support to Ukrainians who are seeing civilians being slaughtered at the hands of the Russians.
And let's talk about, just briefly, if we can, about refugees. What's America doing as regards the refugee crisis?
We can talk about that very briefly, because they're not doing very much at all. In fact, President Biden today, at one point, when he was talking to some Democrats up on Capitol Hill, said that, eventually if some Ukrainians made their way to the United States, then, of course, the United States would welcome them. But the debate in the UK about refugees and the Home Office's response and Priti Patel's arrangements and pop-up visa offices, suddenly being created in Lille, there's simply nothing like that taking place here in the public conversation. There hasn't been since the invasion got underway. The refugee crisis, from the perspective of Washington, D.C., is a European problem.
I believe that Biden's polling has increased lately. Might it go into reverse when Americans start noticing the price rises that are coming down the pipe at them?
Yeah, I think that is the key issue that underscores why President Biden has been spending a lot of time this week trying to replace the supplies of Russian oil that he's now cut off, because remember, this is the week when he banned imports of Russian oil into the United States. And we're seeing the Biden administration scouring some pretty dark corners of the world in a bid to secure those oil supplies, because they know that the American public are not going to wear $6 a gallon for very long, and potentially much higher than that. So there was a delegation from Washington that was in Venezuela last week, suddenly finding some degree of common cause with the dictator who runs things there, Nicolas Maduro, who was smiling like a Cheshire cat, not quite believing the hand that fate had dealt him, because, of course, Venezuela is an oil-rich country, and there were discussions underway about alleviating U.S. sanctions on the Venezuelan energy sector in a way that might allow Venezuela to pick up some of the slack that's going to be created by this cut-off of Russian oil imports. We're also hearing that President Biden might make a presidential visit to Saudi Arabia. I mean, we're 4 years after the murder and dismemberment of Saudi-American journalist Jamal Khashoggi in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. U.S. intelligence says Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman absolutely was responsible for orchestrating that killing. President Biden, up until now, has been pretty insistent that he wants nothing to do with the Saudis, and now suddenly, of course, he needs the Saudis. So we may well see that relationship moving down a slightly different track as well.
Okay, just finally, I can't talk to you, it seems, at all, ever, without mentioning this man's name, but Donald Trump is accused of raping a woman called E. Jean Carroll, who is now a columnist. He's accused of raping her in a New York department store dressing room, and Donald Trump's response is to sue her for defamation. How is that going?
Well, it's not going very well, as you might expect. What he's trying to do, and stop me when this becomes familiar, is he's trying to delay her lawsuit from reaching trial. So he has tried to counter-sue E. Jean Carroll, mostly, I think, in a bid to delay the inevitable, which is her case reaching court. Now a judge has rejected that effort by Donald Trump to engage in the counter-suit, and the judge in the case is arguing, and incidentally, it's exactly the same judge up in New York who was overseeing the lawsuit between Prince Andrew and Virginia Giuffre that officially wrapped up earlier in the week. But the judge is accusing President Trump of acting in bad faith, as he's published this ruling dismissing President Trump's countersuit. He says that former President Trump could have filed this countersuit a long time ago if he'd wanted to, and he's pretty certain that Donald Trump's tactics are entirely aimed at running the clock out on E. Jean Carroll's attempts to bring some measure of justice against the former president for the treatment that she alleges and he denies, which apparently took place in a Manhattan department store in the mid-1990s. So another case, another bit of legal action by Donald Trump being thrown out by a judge. Certainly not the first time we've seen that, and I'm sure it won't be the last.
No, good to talk to you, Simon. Thanks for that. Simon Marks, LBC's US correspondent, joining us from Washington, D.C. 0345 6060 973. So we're talking about what our reaction would be if Russia actually did go ahead and use chemical weapons. As I mentioned before, the West seems to be making loud protest about it before it's happened, perhaps with the idea of making Vladimir Putin, I don't know, can you embarrass somebody like that into not doing it? If the world is saying this is what you're about to do, then perhaps a normal person might think again because you've already been called out for doing it. If that doesn't work with him, then what should we do in the event that the Russians actually do deploy chemical weapons or nuclear weapons? They have these so-called small nuclear devices, tactical nukes, that would create, in the words of some Russian defense analysts, a bigger bang. That's essentially what they think of a tactical nuclear weapon. It just creates a bigger bang. It's not a whole another level of weaponry. Or, as we're reading, and it's very difficult to know what to take at face value, but we're reading that the Russians seem to be deliberately degrading the facilities at Chernobyl in order perhaps to create some disaster there with which they could then blackmail the West. Or maybe they're just idiots and they put clueless people in charge of a nuclear facility. 0345 6060 973. Nick Abbot, LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. LBC with Nick Abbot.
What should our response be, then, if the Russians deploy chemical or nuclear weapons? Vince texts, I cannot believe that even the Russians would have a one person on a big red button. Surely even they would have generals with a say in the matter. Yeah, well, I've tried to engage military people in that. What would happen if Vladimir Putin said, right, that's it? But none of them would actually follow through with that conversation. They all seem to change the topic, perhaps unwilling to engage in such an awful thought. But you'd think that it wouldn't be just one phone call and then it all goes off, that there would have to be multiple people making a decision all the way down the line. And text, I've spent many years of my life hating nuclear weapons. Then Ukraine happens and I start to question all my previous assumptions. Now I'm going back to my original thoughts. What's the point of nuclear weapons if one despot can hold the other nuclear countries to ransom? What happens when other nuclear powers are dread to intervene in the conventional slaughter of another country? Yeah, I mean, the thing with nuclear weapons is that you'd be mad to use one. But if you're mad enough to use one, you're mad enough not to care about or understand the consequences. So mad, mutually assured destruction, ironically, only works if neither side is mad. Paul. Hello, Neil.
Hello, Nick. Yeah, first time caller. Thanks for having me on. I do agree with previous caller from Eastbourne that said this man is clearly disconnected to reality. And I don't think you can really call that hand whether he would be willing to, release a nuclear weapon. You just can't call that hand. But what you could do, I don't think he listens to very much, but I think he can certainly see. I think he's got family, and there's an awful lot of people that are holding money, and they're not all based in Russia. They're all in, a lot of over here. And other countries that are in and around the world, they could easily be rounded up. And in my opinion, it's no bullets required, just be peacefully shipped straight into Ukraine, perhaps a nice safe place like a maternity hospital in Kyiv, and kept there and put that out, live stream it out. I'm sure it'll be picked up quite widely in the American and in the Russian population, and gradually they might see that this man in charge, buried under the ground with a finger on a button, is totally mad and he's got to be stopped. I think it's got to come from their side. The very thought of launching a nuclear missile terrifies me to death. Absolutely terrifies me. But I think he needs to know that if he's talking about the probable possible use of even a limited nuclear strike, he needs to know clearly we will retaliate in mass immediately. As soon as you push that button, you're as dead as we are. And I think and hope that that message just might resonate some way. But if it doesn't, he's going to do it anyway. So
do you actually believe, though, that given the evidence of everything that we've seen already, as being utterly impotent because of an imaginary line that's drawn in the ground beyond which he can do anything he likes, but if he steps 1 foot in the other direction into Moldova, one of the Baltic,
NATO countries.
one of the Baltic states, then that's it. We're going to have at him. It just doesn't seem logical.
As I say, the closest step, he's got family and living in London. Why would you seize their assets? Why not seize them and cart them straight over to the war zone? And let, even though I don't know how much contact the troops on the ground would have with live streaming, but they could see it. This is his family. These are people around him.
Yeah, but that's the assumption that you make is that he actually cares about anybody other than himself and the glory that is Putin. I wonder if he does, or whether he thinks that they would die for Russia and be glorified in doing so. Thanks, Neil. Hastings, David.
Yeah, hi, Nick.
David.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's just so many angles on this that bother me a lot. So if we go back about 10 years, maybe 20 years, when we were making deals of nuclear non-proliferation and all this stuff, it turns out that when there's a count-up, the Russians have got 6,000 nuclear warheads, 1,500 of them deployed. Their navy, their main navy, is actually under the water, not on the water where you can see them. And you can bet your life that every active submarine they've got is now somewhere in the world with the coordinates set for whichever is the nearest city they want to destroy. And we've got three Trident submarines. 2 of them are broken down and 1 of them running around somewhere.
Yeah, but it's not just us, though, is it? I mean, the Russian military might is as nothing compared with NATO.
Yes, it is, but even NATO have been cutting back. Everyone's been and then we've got this really weird situation. Now, I know that there's information. We probably put out our own disinformation, but I don't understand why we keep telling them what we're going to do. And I mean, obviously put out some stuff, but about the jets, why put out that actually what Poland wanted to do was just fly them to a German airbase, and for the Ukrainian pilots to collect them from there? Why not just sneak the pilots over the border into Poland and let them fly the jets out?
Well, we only knew about it.
Why do we keep telling them what we're going to do?
Well, we only knew about it once they had nixed that idea. So I guess that we're not telling them any secrets. We're not telling them what we were going to do. We told them what we might have done, but then decided not to. Or it was decided for us. Thanks, David. Walthamstow. Hello, John.
How you doing?
Good, thanks.
Just before I say anything, I just want to say, what's going on in Ukraine is an absolute tragedy, so I don't condone going on there whatsoever, and it's to comprehend how to be handling the situation. But what I would say is, rhetoric being sort of publicised in the media at the moment about nuclear arms and chemical weapons and all these other aspects of this conflict are just adding fuel to the fire. Putin as a person, I don't personally see him who is crazy. I see him as an arrogant man who's been undermined every aspect, his political position for the last 20 years.
His political position has been undermined?
Yeah, in the sense that he has issues with NATO, he has issues with the gas pipeline. I think I mentioned it before last time. He has his own version of ideals of what he wants with the old Soviet states being brought back under his.
He has issues. Yes.
Yes, but this is a form of arrogance from his political position. He is at the top of his position in Russia. So it comes with the position.
Right. So what are you proposing, though?
Well, if you see what the conflict is currently about being undermined by the opposition in Ukraine. So it would be about Zelensky.
But he's not the opposition in Ukraine. He's the leader of Ukraine.
The opposition.
He's the opposition to Russia. Right. But he's only the
Exactly.
he's only the opposition to Russia because Russia invaded Ukraine. He wasn't the opposition to Russia before Russia invaded Ukraine.
The only way to end this conflict is to take out Zelensky, because that's all that Putin wants.
Right. Okay. Just give him what he wants. All right, thanks, John. Coming up, we're going to look at the government's response to the Ukraine refugee crisis, as over 2 million people have fled Ukraine. Has the mixed messaging this week damaged your confidence in the Home Secretary Priti Patel and this government? Or are they finally getting it right? 0345 6060 973. Nick Abbott, LBC.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Nick Abbott.
It's 3 minutes past 11. I'm Nick Abbott. This is LBC. The government is working on a plan to allow us to open our doors to Ukrainian refugees. I wonder if they are finally getting this right, or is it too little, too late? And how's the Home Secretary Priti Patel doing, in your opinion? I'll take your calls on 0345 6060 973. But first, Sir Roger Gale is a Conservative MP who has been critical of the government's response. Good evening, Sir Roger.
Good evening.
Good evening. So I believe you just returned from Calais and Lille, examining the government's famous world-beating efforts to solve the refugee crisis. What did you find?
Well, I went over yesterday morning at an early hour and went to the facility in Calais port, first of all. And there is a facility there now. It was established after I asked my parliamentary question. And there are a very dedicated, I have to say, team of Border Force officers who are treating people as well as they can under the circumstances. But of course, all they can do is take details. The people, the families that are arriving in Calais then have to be sent back to somewhere else to have their biometrics taken. So having spoken with some of the families there, I then went to Lille, where we were told there was a biometric facility, only to find that there was nothing there at all. As far as we could establish, and half the world's press had been there looking for it, and I think somebody would have found it if there was one, there was nothing. And I was told by a lady working from Care for Calais, and running a refugee hostel there, that those arriving in Lille were told, sorry, you've got to go to Paris or Brussels. Well, these are people with no money, traumatized by war, desperately tired, and very, very distressed. So it wasn't an ideal circumstance. I'm told that today they established a facility in Arras, and hopefully as a result of the Home Secretary's statement by Tuesday, it should be not necessary to have the biometrics done outside the United Kingdom.
Somebody looking on, perhaps who is not familiar with the good work this government has done, might think that one of two things. Either the ineptitude is on a level that's barely credible, or this is part of the scheme, or the sort of silhouette that they've described for themselves as being performatively unkind to foreigners. Which might it be?
I always subscribe, as a general rule, to cock-up rather than conspiracy. The government has done a very great deal to help Ukraine, first in terms of supplying military materiel, weapons, all sorts of equipment that has been desperately needed by the Ukrainian forces, in addition, of course, to the training we've been giving over months to their soldiers. And then, second, we've been providing humanitarian aid, both in Ukraine and in the border countries receiving refugees, and all of that is estimable. The sad thing is that on the receiving refugee front, we've made a pig's ear of it. Not to put too fine a point on it, where, and I'm old enough to remember, sadly, in 1972, we took in 25,000 Ugandan nations from Idi Amin's Uganda. Almost overnight, they arrived at an airfield in Westmoreland in Kent, were fed and watered by a firm called Gardner Merchant, who literally fed the 25,000. and they lived in a tented city while they were dispersed. Now, the reason I know that is because I covered that story for BBC Radio London. And I went down and saw it all for myself. So it can be done. It was done then, and it could be done again. This seems to have been little short of a shambles.
So is it to be laid at the feet of the Home Secretary? You were quite critical of her this week. Can you just explain why?
Well, yes, because she said on Monday a week ago that there was a facility in Calais. There was not. There is now, but there wasn't then. So that was quite completely incorrect.
And Lille?
Then she told the House that there was facility in Lille, and as far as any of us can establish, there is no facility in Lille. But I think as a result, partly of a meeting that a lot of Conservative backbenchers had with Michael Gove on Wednesday night, when we were asked in terms, should the biometrics be done in Britain or in mainland Europe, and all but one of us said in Britain. The following day, the Home Secretary made a statement indicating that the biometrics would be done in Britain and that people could log on online to come to the United Kingdom. That's a significant step forward. But, of course, that is only the family members. It doesn't deal with the others who want to come. And we're still waiting for the details of the humanitarian sponsorship scheme, as it's called. I believe that will follow. It's in hand. And I attended a meeting earlier tonight with Michael Gove and Lord Harrington, Richard Harrington, as was the Member of Parliament, who's got great expertise in dealing with refugees from Syria and from Afghanistan. And I think the combination of Michael Gove and Richard Harrington will get to grips with this problem. I certainly hope so. My personal view, for what it's worth, is that we should actually have a visa waiver for any children from Ukraine and for any adult carrying a current valid Ukrainian passport, which peculiarly does also have biometrics in it.
Yes, the government says that they're moving slowly and cautiously because they are concerned that Ukrainians have been armed in their country. Does that sound credible?
No, it doesn't really. And if you actually wanted to check cars or whatever coming into the country and remove weapons, then I guess you could do so. And the idea that this is a matter of national security just doesn't hold water, I'm afraid. I mean, you will remember, of course, but the two gentlemen who so charmingly took a foreign holiday in Salisbury and then poisoned the Skripals, subsequently revealed to be Russian agents, came in on visitors' visas. So, I think we can say that if people want to get into this country, they're going to do it. And I think that the time has come when we ought to take a totally humanitarian approach to this. Look, there are not thousands and thousands of Ukrainian refugees wanting to come to the United Kingdom. There are certainly millions going over the border into Poland, into Romania, into Moldova, into Hungary. But most of those people, one, bless them, want to go back home as soon as they can. God knows when that will be, but they want to go home. They don't want to emigrate to anywhere. And second, if they can't go back home, then they want to stay as close to home as they possibly can, so that when the time comes, they're on the doorstep. There are some with family in the United Kingdom who want to come and join their family. And there are some others who, for other reasons, maybe because they speak good English, maybe because they like the English, who want to come to England. My view is that we should welcome them with open arms.
And what do you think of this notion that people should open their own homes to refugees? Does that sound like a feasible plan?
Yes, absolutely it does. I mean, from the time that I started campaigning on this issue, which is now, a couple of weeks ago, I suppose, I have had a significant number of offers from mainly constituents, but also from people across East Kent and indeed some from further afield, saying, yes, I've got a spare room, I've got a flat, I've got a house. I'd like to make it available to Ukrainian refugees very generously. And that's what we do. That's what the British do. I mean, I think I'm right in saying that I'm probably the only, to date, Member of Parliament on either side of the House who's actually had an asylum seeker in his own home. That was 20 years ago. My wife and I took a Romanian orphan in. He was about 16 or 17. We do this as a nation. We are a kind, sympathetic, generous people. The amount of money that's been given proves that. The fact that people are opening their purses and giving what little they've got, and in some cases it is very little. It just demonstrates the feeling of the general public, and I think not everybody, but most people are warm-hearted and want to welcome these people who are fleeing from a war zone.
It seems a bit cobbled.
Nothing.
Sorry to interrupt, but it seems a bit sort of Dad's Army-ish cobbled together. Wouldn't it be better for those fleeing this war zone to be together in some sort of community where they have common language and common culture, and they can, help each other in a way that people that don't have any experience of that would be perhaps unable to? Sort of maroon them in sort of little islands of their own in somebody else's house seems a little less ideal than to make a community or at least several communities for them, no?
I think it's a question of some and some. There are Ukrainian communities within the United Kingdom who will look after their own, welcome them, do all the things that need to be done. But we're talking about a lot of people who have lost, we have to remember this, lost literally everything. In some cases, they're coming out with a cat and nothing else, or a dog. And in some cases, they've travelled almost at the drop of a hat, slinging into a suitcase what pitifully few possessions they can pack. And they come halfway across Europe. And they're traumatised, and they're tired, and they're frightened. And I think the first thing they want is a welcome. So I know families locally good people, who will put them up, make them welcome in their own homes, treat them as part of the family for as long as they need. Hopefully for not very long, because, yes, they will want to move on. They will want to establish homes of their own. They will want to rebuild lives, if possible, obviously to go back to Ukraine. But that won't always be possible. But I think we have to accept that there will be a mixture. There will be some people, generous people, who will offer homes, and some people who will want to take up that offer. And then there will be others within the Ukrainian community that will want to, as you say, be around people who speak their own language, understand their own culture, and can make a fresh start and a fresh life for themselves in that way. So we shouldn't rule anything out, and we shouldn't rule anything in, particularly, I don't think.
Do you feel slightly uncomfortable in the different reaction that this country has had to white European refugees and those from, say, Afghanistan and Syria?
I think this is a different case because it is a European country, and Ukraine is a European country, a very modern European country. I've been there several times as an international election observer. I've been to Kharkiv. I was in Crimea before it was occupied. I wouldn't say I know the country that well, but it is patently apparent to any observer that it is a modern European culture and country, and therefore easier to assimilate to some extent. But this is the first war of this kind in Europe since 1944, effectively. And I think everybody understands that there is a difference.
Can I ask what your feelings are when you hear Boris Johnson in the Prime Minister's Question Time insist that no country has done more for the plight of refugees or is doing more, which really by any measure is patently untrue?
I think there may be a degree of hyperbole in that, but I think the Prime Minister, and as you know, I'm not a paid-up member of his fan club, but nevertheless, I think over this he has shown a degree of statesmanship, and I think as a country we have done a very great deal. Whether we've done more, it's questionable. I mean, I wouldn't know, to be honest. People have done different things in different ways, but collectively, I think the alliance is doing its best to hold the line, short of providing air cover, which probably would lead to World War III. I think we are doing what we can do, and we are being as robust as we can. We may have been slow on the mark, off the mark in some instances, of those who say, oh yes, well, other other oligarchs have been sanctioned more than the ones that we've sanctioned. And up to a point, I think that's probably true. In other respects, we've moved faster than other countries. So again, it's some and some. But we're getting there. The Economic Crimes Bill will go through the House of Lords on Monday, come back with any amendments that there are to the House of Commons, and ought to be signed off by Her Majesty as an Act of Parliament, I would hope, on Tuesday or Wednesday. And that will give us more powers to do what we need to do, but legally.
And just finally, your thoughts about the Home Secretary. She seems to have been bypassed now.
Well, I made my antipathy known on the floor of the House. I don't think she has handled this at all well. That is a matter for the Prime Minister and her to discuss.
OK, thank you, Sir Roger. Sir Roger Gale, the Conservative MP for North Thanet, who has just returned from France, where he has been looking at the situation with Ukrainian refugees. The number here, 0345 6060 973. We are a kind and sympathetic and generous people. We open our arms to those in need, said Sir Roger. Does that sound right? Is that this country that you know? Or has the Conservative Party actually sold themselves to us on their enmity for foreigners, this aggressive approach to others, which seems to chime well with a considerable number of people in this country? 0345 6060 973.
Leading Britain's conversation. LBC with Nick Abbot.
The Times conducted a poll. A poll says 6 in 10 people believe that Britain is not doing enough to help Ukrainian refugees. 6 in 10. Only 7% of those that expressed a preference think that Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, actually wants to help Ukrainians come to the UK. 7%. 0345 6060 973. Do you think they're finally getting it about right, or is there still plenty more to do? Tynmouth, David.
Yeah, good evening. Yeah, 2 days ago I resigned from the Conservative Party after 60 years because of how they've messed this up. And it's very simple things that they've done wrong. You know, on the television they showed the people queuing at Arras. Now, they had them queuing in the street. It wouldn't take much intelligence to get some chairs for them to sit down, some blankets to keep them warm while they're waiting. They've had enough of scrabbling all across Europe without this. And at Calais, what they should have done, I've come from the hospitality industry, but they could have got some marquees, fitted it out with some comfortable furniture, brought some children's entertainers over, because the people that do that sort of thing in this country would love to have done that, gone over, entertained the kids so they make them feel contented at home, and they could have sorted or take a ferry round and put them on. But there's so many simple things they could have done, but they didn't, because they didn't care. And it really appalls me, after being a voting Conservative for 60 years. And I wonder, but I'm not sure the other side is any better, but the Priti Patel should be shot. She is useless.
Well, let's not get carried away. Fired, I think, is what you meant to say. Thanks, David. 0345 6060 973. People keep saying, they're making so many mistakes. These are schoolboy errors about, they're not providing the right facilities, or they're saying that there are visa facilities in Calais when there actually aren't. You have to go back to Paris, which is like a 600-kilometre round trip. And they're making all of these errors and these mistakes. They don't seem like errors and mistakes to me. Seems more like the plan. Up until now, and that plan has been working for them just fine. Their fans love it. Up until now. And I wonder if the government is actually quite taken aback at the change in opinion from people who actually vote Conservative. Because a week or so ago, when the poll came out and the question was something of the order of, do we have a moral obligation to open our borders to those fleeing war in Ukraine? Labour supporters were overwhelmingly in favour of that proposal, that we have a moral obligation. I think it was something like 80% of Labour voters said, yes, we do. I think 60% of, this is off the top of my head now, but it was something like 60% of Tory voters said, no, we don't, overwhelmingly, against the idea. A week later, and Labour voters are more clear about their desire to open our borders, and even the Conservative voters are now in favour, by a smaller margin, of doing just that. Yet the government is still playing to the old Conservative voters, how they used to think 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago. I'm sure that they're quite discombobulated at the notion that their fans now have changed their minds and are busy scrabbling around trying to catch up in order to keep them on side. It doesn't look like accidents to me. 0345 6060 973. Tottenham, hello Tim.
Hi there.
Tim.
How are you?
Good.
Good. Sorry to walk the conversation back to the Putin debate, but I think we're in a bit of trouble, and I think I don't like the direction. I'm really worried about the direction that this is taking.
Well, you're not alone there, Tim. Believe me.
I think in essence what's happening at the moment is Putin he has us exactly where he wants us. We're in the first couple of rounds of a boxing match, and Putin is feeling out where we are, and we are responding exactly the way that he expects us to respond at every turn. I'm
not sure that's true.
Okay.
I very much doubt that he was expecting the kind of sanctions that are being imposed on him and those closest to him. But go ahead.
I think the sanctions are an irrelevance. I don't think they touch Putin. I mean, are we realistically saying that after 20 years in power, he hasn't built up structures around himself that allow him to get whatever he wants whenever he wants? The sanctions aren't touching him.
Well, I'm sure, but he does live in Russia, and if you... Are you okay?
Yeah.
If you if you ruin the country that you're standing in of 140 million people or whatever it is, then you're going to feel the effects of that one way or another.
I agree for the person on the street, but I don't think the person on the street has any access to Putin whatsoever. I think what's going to happen is, within a relatively short space of time, he'll use chemical weapons and will impose more sanctions and will condemn it in the strongest terms. And I think he won't care. And then he'll progress further and he'll think about using a tactical nuke. And then he'll start looking further and he'll start looking to the Baltics. And once he looks at the Baltics, he's going to look at the ones which are non-nuclear, which is all of them. And he's going to say, okay, NATO, let's see how much Article 5 holds up. And he'll attack. And then we will be faced, and America particularly will be faced, with the question, do we launch weapons? Do we end the world to save Lithuania? And I think the obvious answer, if it was me in power in US, I'm sure if it was you in power in US, your only option would be, I've got to leave them to it. I can't destroy the world for the sake of a single nation in Eastern Europe. And I think Putin knows that. I think we're in trouble. He's going to test Article 5. NATO will be broken, and he'll stop when he stops. I think we're in genuine trouble.
All right. Thanks for that cheery call, Tim. 0345 6060 973. Thomas text, Priti Patel is the kind of person that would ask a starving orphan, what's the magic word? Victor texts, the reality is that refugees fleeing from violence perpetrated by our enemies are considered worthy victims, whereas those fleeing our violence are considered unworthy victims, like those in Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya and Syria. Perhaps I misspoke. Didn't get the emphasis right there. The reality is that refugees fleeing violence from perpetrated by our enemies are considered worthy, whereas those fleeing our violence are considered unworthy. Right, got it. I'll do a couple more texts. There's a caller lined up from the Czech Republic, so I want to give him a little more than the 40 seconds that's left before the news, so I'll read a couple more. Nick texts, Boris and co are a shambles. It's embarrassing and the whole country should be ashamed. Again, I think shambolic is his sort of image I don't think that that's who he is, or that is what describes this response. I think it's precisely what they intended. It's not an accident. Making it difficult for foreigners to get here seems to be how this Conservative Party have defined themselves and sold themselves to their fans. And up until now, they've loved every minute of it. It's 11:30 on LBC, the news headlines with Serena Farrow.
This is LBC with Nick Abbott.
0345 6060 973. I'm talking about our response to the refugee crisis. Seems a bit mean-spirited, and there's a lot of misinformation coming from the government about what it is that they have been doing. What do you make of that? And particularly the role of Priti Patel in all this. Ostrava, Czech Republic. Hello, Mark.
Hi there, Nick. How you doing?
Good, thanks.
Okay. So I just I'm a British national. I live in the Czech Republic. I'm actually an English teacher here, and I've recently been up to the border, the Polish-Ukraine border, and I volunteered as a helper there, helping process refugees as they're crossing the border and being moved to a kind of transit center in a nearby town called Przemysl, which is in eastern Poland. I just thought you might be interested in the experience I had there, and also as hosting some Ukrainian nationals as well. That I spoke to there and brought back to my family house in
absolutely. Tell us about your experience.
So this is the second family that I've hosted. I took it up on my own initiative to drive up to the border in Poland. I heard about this town Przemysl as it's 14 kilometers from the Medyka border, which is Poland-Ukraine border crossing, and basically at that border crossing, the refugees crossing there are being put onto buses and taken to an old shopping center in this town. It's actually a shopping mall, which was a Tesco and other shops. And it's basically all the shops have been cleared out, and the whole of the Tesco and the warehouse and the shops there are actually being used for this relief crisis. So you've got buses coming in every few minutes from the border. You've got tens of people getting off the buses. Some of these people have onward places to go to, so there are buses leaving from there to take them to the train station. There are different charities operating there. Individuals like myself who come with a car full of things to help, but also looking to take back some refugees to host in our houses. So it was really quite a interesting experience, and I would call it sort of organized chaos. There's a lot of different charities working there. I actually volunteered for 5 hours I got registered there, and they allowed me to then just chip in and just get talking to people. What I found was there were quite a few people that didn't have no onward places to go to, no contacts in Europe, no transportation, and literally, didn't know what to do next. And of course, many people looking totally, terribly exhausted. The family that I brought back, which was actually a mother and a 17-year-old daughter, they travelled from Kharkiv. They travelled 22 hours by train to escape from Kharkiv to Lvov. Lvov is 70 kilometers from the Polish border. Then they spent some time in Lvov before they were able to get onto a bus, a three-hour ride to the border. 6 hours waiting at the border crossing to get through there, and then a bus ride to this kind of a holding center. They'd been at the holding center for 2 days. By the time I'd met them, and by the time I met them and got talking to them, they were absolutely totally exhausted. They could hardly They could hardly speak. The mother was so tired. It was really, very, very heartbreaking. And it was the end of the day, and my car was empty. I just had my co-driver with me. It's a 500-kilometer drive to my house from Przemysl, this town. But I said, look, my name's Mark. I live in the Czech Republic. I'm a family man. I've got children, a Czech wife. But we've got a bedroom. We can host you for as long as you need. It's clean, it's warm. If you'd like to come back with me now and my co-driver, I was registered there. There is a registration process just to take the details down. So before of course you leave there with someone. The mother just said, please get us out of here. And I was listening to the interview you had a little bit earlier, and these people, they need somewhere that's welcoming. They need somewhere where they can get their energy back, comprehend the situation. They need a few days to do this. And then they can make decisions about what next. And there are the Czech Republic is very welcoming. Now there are Ukrainian refugees scattered all over my region. I hear about more and more every day. So the Czech Republic is really opening its doors to the refugees and welcoming them here and supporting them here. So I have the mother and daughter here downstairs, actually sleeping at the moment. They're moving on tomorrow to another city where the woman's actually got some work now. So they will be moving off tomorrow. And I will be going back to the border again on Sunday. Again, another 5-6 hour drive, helping there for another 5-6 hours, and then hopefully I'll be able to bring somebody else back and support them until they can plan, what next.
And what about the people you're driving from Czechia through Poland? What about the people in Poland in particular, because they're right there on the border as you just described? How are they feeling about the war as it's sort of moving towards them?
I haven't actually had a chance to talk to many Polish people, but they've opened their doors to 1.4 million Ukrainian nationals. I think so far, up until now, the war has been kind of focused on eastern, southern, and northern kind of Ukraine, and the western Ukraine has been pretty much untouched by this. Although they've got a lot of migration into this region. But of course, today we heard about the attacks on I think it was Lutsk and another town in the west. So now I think people will start to become a lot more nervous. And I think also the crisis on the borders, the refugee crisis, will also become a lot worse as well. So, but I'm going back up there, as like I said, on Sunday. So maybe I'll get a bit more opportunity to talk to people there. But so I'm not sure about that.
Okay, very good to talk to you, Mark, and we would appreciate it if when you have the time, you called us back and gave us an update. Thanks for that. 0345 6060 973. We're talking about our response to this refugee crisis, whether you think it's we're doing just exactly the right thing, we're going very slowly, very methodical, not making any missteps, or whether you think that we're just way too slow and too mean. Pete says, I think that Patel is desperately clinging on to her hostile environment idea. Well, it's perhaps one of the major reasons that the Conservative Party is leading the country, that hostile environment idea. They would be loath to give it up because it has proved so popular and successful for them. Oxted, hello, John.
Good day. Hello, Nick.
John.
I wanted to just say that the previous caller, Mark, well done. Big, good man. I would do exactly the same if I had. I only had one bedroom here in a small little house, but I would definitely help the Ukrainian people. Feel really, really terribly sorry for them. And what a psychopath and a coward there is in Russia. Just the whole army are just nothing but terrorists. I'm disgusted. But I wanted to say, Nick, that this Priti Patel, is it?
Yeah.
She's going to have her work really cut out this year. I don't know if anyone's thinking about the future, but these Ukrainian people definitely need some help. And I wonder what is going to happen when a lot of people are going to start coming across the British Channel again and provided by a taxi service to bring them here, which I find is a joke. Where are those people from Ukraine going to be housed? I mean, it's just ridiculous, isn't it? I wonder what you think.
Well, there's multiple options, I would think. I mean, people on social media have, perhaps with their tongue in their cheek, knowing that no such thing will ever happen, have suggested that Buckingham Palace is a rather large house, which the Queen has said she doesn't want to live in anymore. They've got 775 rooms. I mean, there's at least enough room there for 100 people. If you don't want to have them wander around the Queen's most valuable knickknacks, then they've got 188 staff bedrooms. There can't possibly be 188 staff there. Why don't we use some of those? There's also cruise liners. I mean, there's cruise liners that are bobbing about empty on the high seas because people don't want to go on a cruise anymore, for COVID reasons, and then now we've got this. So wouldn't it be a marvellous idea if we repurposed them? I mean, people spend tens of thousands of pounds for the benefit of going on a cruise liner, so it can't be that bad. And there would be the benefit of people from Ukraine being in a community. It's going to be doubly hard, I would think, that if you've come all the way from Ukraine and then you're stuck out on a farm in the middle of Cambridgeshire, for instance, and you've got absolutely no contact with anybody from the place that you just fled from. Wouldn't it be better for all concerned if they were housed in communities? And as we can't pop up communities out of nowhere, well, I guess we can. We could make tented cities. We're through the worst of winter now, so it wouldn't be inconceivable as a short-term, like Philip, at the very least. We could create tented cities on disused airfields, of which we have a number in this country. There's other options, it seems to me, than getting people to open their own homes. In fact, this may be a conspiracy theory too far, but it seems to me the sort of reaction that the government has given to this, they've been pushed into doing something. Their instinctual reaction was to do nothing and to hell with them, to lie about how we're actually doing our best and leading the world, and then do nothing. And then they were pushed into a corner by so many people shouting at them that they said, oh, OK then, you want the refugees, you put them in your house. And that's where we are. It doesn't seem, like I said to Sir Roger, I was speaking to him earlier on, it seems a bit cobbled together Dad's Army-ish, doesn't it? Really? That's what we've got. The 5th richest economy in the world, so we're told over and over again. Global Britain, that's what we've got. We've got to put people up in our own homes such that the government can say that it's doing something. 0345 6060 973, Nick Abbot, LBC.
This is LBC with Nick Abbott. Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850.
0345 6060 973. Dan texts, we have hundreds of properties in Kensington which Russian oligarchs have bought. Why not repurpose them for Ukrainian refugees? Well, specifically because Boris Johnson ordered his MPs to reject proposals for the immediate freeze of the likes of mansions, yachts, flats and aircrafts. we've given them enough time to move their assets out of the country, to sell them off. And we still wouldn't know who owns a place if it was bought with a shell company, which is based in a tax haven, which has probably got the Union Jack fluttering from its government building. That's still not in our suite of available sanctions. Specifically because Boris Johnson ordered his MPs to make it so. Ealing, hello, John.
Hello, how are you doing?
Good, thanks.
I tell you what, I'm getting so knocked off right now because it's just the absolute detritus and rubbish I keep hearing from people. I mean, one of your callers, I don't know if he was an MP, describing Michael Gove as competent. I mean, Jesus. I mean, this guy is an absolute buffoon. I mean, most of them are. Priti Patel, buffoon. Dave, cleverly, not so clever. Priti Patel, a complete joke. It's absolute. They're an absolute shower, and I just. At what point are we just going to just chuck them all out? Because they're so drenched in Russian money, they're drunk with it to the point where they have no moral conscience at all. And then we're being told that they're helping out the Ukrainians, and they're helping out while dragging their feet so the Russian oligarchs can take all of their money out of this country and just send it off to the Cayman Islands or wherever they're going to send it to. It's beyond contempt, and they're supposed to be representing us.
Well, perhaps they do. I mean, I've heard about 1,000 times that people knew what they were voting for, mostly in respect to, well, enough people did in the system that we enjoy in this country to make it that they are ruling the country unopposed.
But Nick, they're corrupt, and they're beyond corrupt. So the point is, though, and not only they're corrupt, I would argue in some cases they are actually traitors to their own country. Because if you get in bed with Russia and Saudi Arabia and China, who have a diametrically opposed ideology towards our country, right? You're making a choice. And I'm sorry, money is not everything. You actually, you have to, this idea that somehow we're looking after the Ukrainians and their children being killed, massacred, left, right, and centre. And it's the idea, it's like that. One of your callers just rang up and he said, well, if we had to have a choice between fighting Russia and World War III, we're just going to have to let, Putin get what he wants and get rid of the president of Ukraine. When did we become such absolute spineless people as a country? And yet, you've got Boris Johnson talking about Winston Churchill and Churchillian values and all these things. This is Nazism. This is fascism. What we're facing, Putin is a fascist. Let's not think he's a communist. He's a fascist. And the bottom line is, unless we actually stand up and fight, he's going to keep moving from country to country to country to country. And it's as simple as that.
All right. Okay. All right. Thanks, John. He is quite possibly will do that, assuming that he wins in Ukraine, or assuming that he doesn't go metaphorically and literally nuclear. At which point he can do anything he wants, because on current evidence we won't do anything for fear of that. Iowa. Hello, Joe.
Hey, how you doing, Nick?
Good, thanks.
Yeah, I was mentioning to your the guy that answered that here in the U.S., I've been finding it very interesting. I listen to LBC a lot while I'm driving, but here in the U.S., there's virtually no talk whatsoever of us taking refugees in. And yeah, we are a bit larger than the UK, and it's a bit shocking. It's a bit shocking that something like that hasn't come over yet. And I suppose maybe it's just in the works and it just hasn't happened yet. But you would think that would be just an immediate knee-jerk kind of thing to bring them here, because not only do we have lots of space, lots of houses, we also have a major shortage of workers here as well. And it would just be a blessing, quite honestly, for people to come here. And I've got plenty of room in my house. I could put up 4 or 5 people pretty easily, and they could find jobs probably in 24 hours. So I wanted to just share that. Hopefully that's going to happen soon. That'll take the pressure off of a lot of the other European countries.
Yeah. It is difficult to keep in mind that this has only been going on for about a week and a half now, 2 weeks, I guess.
Right.
And I suppose it's not that surprising because it's a different continent. I mean, we in Europe don't consider giving refuge to those fleeing, wars and so on in South America, because that's your continent. So perhaps it's not too surprising that at this early stage, that subject has not been broached much in America. But thanks for that, Joe. See if I can squeeze one more in. Montpellier. Hello, Robin.
Oh, good morning. Good morning.
Robin.
As a point of finding accommodation for refugees, I'm old enough to remember the Hungarian Revolution of 1956, when the refugees again came to this country. What was done at that time, which was incredibly sensible, because I lived on the East Coast, the holiday camps were then closed for the winter. They were shut. So what they did, the refugees moved in to the holiday camps, which were set up for dealing with large numbers of people anyway, living together. And once they were settled then, the government people turned up and set themselves up to collect details of the people. And the local authority, like the WBS, moved in and helped the people as well. But they remained in a community, in living accommodation, and it worked extremely well. I can't think why they haven't thought of it now.
Well, that does sound like a pretty good idea. Thanks for that, Robin. I just feel that if it was me and I was fleeing my homeland, I would be enormously grateful for somebody in a foreign land to give me a room in their house. But I feel I would prefer to be put up in a community of other people with a similar experience to me. 0345 6060 973. I'll take more of your calls on this conflict in Ukraine after the news. Does the West need to do more to protect human life? And would you home a Ukrainian refugee in your house? 0345 6060 973 LBC.
Is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Nick Abbot.
3 minutes past midnight, I'm Nick Abbot on LBC. The West has increased sanctions on people linked with the Russian state this week, but are they doing enough? Are we doing enough to prevent further bloodshed in Ukraine? Your calls in a moment on 0345 6060 973. First, let's cross to the States and speak to Bob Mulholland, who is a Democratic National Committee member and strategist in California, also a Vietnam vet. Hello, Bob.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us.
Yes.
The response by NATO so far in military terms has been to tut loudly. Do you think that's going to change if the Russians use chemical and or nuclear weapons?
Well, it's the end of the world. They use nuclear, and obviously chemical is a big problem. But, my own view is, as a Vietnam vet, and I was wounded in Vietnam from a mortar, that NATO has no exit strategy. And when you keep arming Ukraine, right now it's just every city in Ukraine, at least on the eastern side, is going to be destroyed. And I look at it and go, what exactly is NATO's plan? to get out of this situation. I don't think Putin says, "Oh, okay," puts the white flag up because of sanctions. That's just not in the nature of a Putin or a Trump. It's just not in their nature.
So what then? What do you foresee?
Well, I think that my own view was, I don't know why NATO and Ukraine for 30 years dithered about Ukraine joining NATO. If Ukraine had been smart, they would have said years ago to Russia, which they share a language with, they share a border, they would have said to Russia, look, we're going to be independent, but we're going to work with you economically, and let's sign a deal for half price on natural gas and oil. Instead, NATO and Ukraine talked, and then the president of Ukraine last year brought the issue up again. Well, he got Putin's attention, so now we're in a jam, and I don't see any solution. I mean, NATO, especially America, my home country, we just go into these wars down a hole with a rope and no ladder to get out. And just last year, we left Afghanistan after 20 years of training people who couldn't read or write, $1.5 trillion in pounds spent, tens of thousands of lives. And what was the end? Getting out on the last plane. And Afghanistan's a disaster. So I feel terrible for the people of Ukraine, but this is a geopolitical issue that should have been decided by the adults years ago. And I personally resent the Ukrainian president on TV every day demanding that British and American planes start shooting down Russian planes. Because when he says NATO, we know it's not Iceland, it's British and American. And what does the Ukrainian president think that if British and American planes start shooting down Russia, like, oh, okay, it'd be over in a day? No, the country of Ukraine would be destroyed by nuclear or chemical weapons.
Now, okay, so if we are to just stand there and watch it happen, what would then occur if Vladimir Putin started to encroach onto the Baltic states, for instance? Well,
I go way back in history, and President Eisenhower told Kennedy, you better save Laos, otherwise the communists will take over Thailand and India. And this is a common theme. You better get into Syria, otherwise you better get into Iraq, you better get into Afghanistan. It's a different story if any Russian leader decided to attack a NATO country. That means Article 5. That means the U.S. Congress declares war on Russia. We start the military draft, raise taxes on everybody, and go to war with Russia. That's been in the paper, in the memos for decades. Hopefully it never happens, but it's in the memo. But Ukraine is not a NATO country, so if Russia or anybody else, then we know what the rules are. But here's the tragedy of America. The last time Congress declared war was in 1942 against Romania, Hungary, and Bulgaria. Congress is an inept body of America. They just keep funding wars and funding them and sending American troops in over 100 countries, tens of thousands of dead. We got the highest record of active American committing suicide, service members committing suicide every day. So we're in a jam. We continue to be in a jam, and I don't see any hope. Now, but if the Ukrainian president was smart through his diplomatic, we're at it. Let's end this war. Give me gas and oil for half price, and I'm never joining NATO. That's as simple as I was thinking today. Bobby Kennedy, Cuban Missile Crisis. Jack tells Bobby, cut a deal with the Russians or Soviets, and Bobby says to Khrushchev through the intermediaries, get your missiles out of Cuba, and we'll pull our missiles out of Turkey, but privately. Soviets agreed. We avoided nuclear war. And, if Kennedy had not pulled that off, none of us would be talking today. Now, everybody needs to save face. Everybody needs to be able to tell their people we accomplished something. If you got superpowers involved with nuclear, don't think you can beat the other guy down to the point where he's screaming, I give up, I give up. No, that's not the way it works. They'll blow themselves up before they give up. So, say Putin then invades Latvia. Do you really think that, based on what you've seen so far, that this Article 5, this NATO treaty that says that an attack on one is an attack on all, and we will defend to the best of our ability, do you really think that we're going to go to war
given that we've done nothing so far, they've been bombing disabled care homes. They've been bombing maternity hospitals. I mean, what else do they need to do? They've been shelling a nuclear power station, for crying out loud.
NATO has been talking this way for decades, and Christmas Day of '91 is when the Soviet Union collapsed. And I wish then that the best and brightest of the smart people in NATO had said, "That's it. The Soviet Union's collapse. That's the end of it. Let's keep NATO right where it is, and don't bother the Russians." However, they got this agreement, and if you sign agreements, you're supposed to abide by it. So,
but do you think we would? Do you really think we would?
Well, take the issue of Taiwan. Who the hell thinks that if China, the mainland, attacks Taiwan, that America is going to save Taiwan? But on paper, it's like Israel has nuclear weapons, but they'll never acknowledge it. Let's hope we don't. Let's hope we can say, let's cut some deals here. Look, Russia depends on selling its oil and gas to Europe, Western Europe. And right now they're still doing it. Every day they get euros sent by some bank. And they need us. We need them. I just don't know why 30 years ago we decided that Russia was the enemy. Many Americans don't even know whose side the Soviets were on in World War II. They get all confused. They think Soviets were in war against America and the Germans were helping us. So don't expect. No, I'm telling you the truth. And what's most Americans thinking about today? The baseball contracts got solved yesterday. So baseball will start soon. That's where Americans are. However, if this crisis stays long, we, the Democrats, are going to get crushed this November in the midterms. Americans don't put up with high gas prices. They'll take it out on whoever's in office, and that's us Democrats.
There's a lot of people say that, this wouldn't have happened under Trump. What do you think of that?
Actually, Trump is the one that gave the green light to Putin. We have for over 4 years. We have no idea what the two of them were discussing in the private meetings we know about. That he kicked everybody out except the translators, and he gave private classified information to the Russian staff. I think Trump, historians will judge, was the guy that gave the green light. And then when this whole thing happened a few weeks ago, what did Trump? He called Putin genius. Great strategy for surrounding Ukraine. If that's not a green light, I don't know what is.
What do you make of the tactics, the sort of basic military tactics that the Russians have been displaying?
Well, as one who spent a total of 2 years in the Army, but I've read over 200 books on wars and stuff, and have gone visited in the gravesite of General Patton in Luxembourg, and I just know that long wars don't work. And these tactics that seem to fail, but we don't know. Maybe these are exactly what Putin's generals were planning. I mean, it's funny. Bush Jr. invaded illegally Iraq in 2003, and it was 22 days before Baghdad fell. And the Western media said, success, great movement by the British and American, everything's success. But now we know they're really being delayed, the tactics of Russia. Here's the bottom line in war. Whatever your plan is, it won't go that way. Whatever you decided, as soon as the first bullet is shot, you go into a whole different sermon. Every military in the world knows that.
Good to talk to you, Bob. Thanks for your time. Bob Mulholland, former Democrat National Committee member and strategist in California, also a Vietnam vet. 0345 6060 973 LBC.
This is LBC with Nick Abbott.
0345 6060 973. Claire tweets, hello, wake up. We have no housing. We can't house all the Afghanistan refugees we supported in hotels and still in hotels. We are not rich. Stop talking rubbish and wake up and be transparent and realistic. We have ex-servicemen sleeping rough and child poverty. Yes, Claire, but actually we are rich. It's just that the wealth is not spread evenly around. The vast majority of the wealth in this country resides in the bank accounts of the top 1%. Everybody else gets precious little. We are rich, if only we spread it about a bit. But we keep, as a country, we keep voting for the party that would that would spread it about as the absolute last available option to them. They're never going to do it. We keep voting them in. Brenda, St Ives. Hello, Brenda.
Hi, Nick.
Brenda.
Well, I think this is as plain as our noses on our faces. This whole intel system is geared to prevent people coming in, and I think it's to placate their Brexiteer voters, and it's all planned. When you think that the documentation, they need like 14 pages, and birth certificates and utility bills, is just outrageous, and if they don't want them here, they don't want them to come. The thing is, like the Afghan repatriation, that is a total mess. Nothing was planned. I mean, I listened to the Canadian in Ontario, what they were going to put into place. They've got it all organised. They've got businesses and companies already. They've got their state equivalent, our councils, going to be there to really get it sorted. We're just hopeless at the plan, and Priti Patel is just the most disgusting, disgraceful, discompassionate person on the face of this earth, and it is bad. But I always thought that in war we had an obligation to protect those people in wartime situations. So this 200,000 that Boris has spurted out, is pie in the sky. And the fact that he says that, we've done the best, we've done, given equipment, done this, done that, but actually it's humanity that counts, not equipment and not bureaucracy.
Okay, thanks, Brenda. 0345 6060 973. I think but what Brenda was saying sounds right to me, that it's not an accident, it's not screw-ups, they're not being inept. This is exactly the plan. Because this Conservative Party have defined themselves by being unwelcoming to foreigners. That's their unique selling point. And it really works. With just enough people to give them a stonking majority. And they're loath to give that up, because what else have they got? The redistribution of wealth? No. What else do they have that would actually appeal to enough people to get them re-elected, other than being unwelcoming to foreigners, which is the thing that cuts through? It's the issue that reaches the parts that other issues just can't reach. Leicester. Hello, Helen.
Hi, Nick. This is my first time of speaking with you.
Hello.
So I'm really glad you're very firm and very just in what you're saying. I totally agree that there was a man on with you, and he was speaking regarding where the war was going to and how you don't get involved in war and all these. And he seemed very knowledgeable. That's nice. The problem that he just didn't mention was the nuclear war. Nobody seems to be too willing to shout it out very loud in this country that NATO coaxed Ukraine to give up its nuclear weapons with a promise. We will protect you. We promise you. We will protect you. They're not protecting them.
Well, I'm not sure that the promise was to protect. I think the promise was not to invade, which is different.
Well, I heard it on the news, and I heard it in government, and they've used the words they would protect them. Now, that man said, the Ukrainian president, who, in my eyes, I only wish that we had a prime minister such as him, because I find that he is an honest man. I find that he's a humble man, and they're a very proud people. And he is going to fight to his death, and that is so sad. But if we've got Putin, and it's all Putin, if we had a man walking up the street doing something very irrational and we phoned the medical services, they would come along, They would assess him and say, okay, he's a danger to himself, he's a danger to others, therefore he's mad, he needs locked away, and he needs somebody to think for him. Here we have President Putin, who is obviously mad and evil, but mad. And all these governments from around the world are sitting day in, day out going, well, I wonder what he's going to do next. Wonder if he'll use them. Wonder if he'll do that. Wonder if he'll do... Why are they not taking this control out of that madman's hands? No one wants war. I don't want war. I'm only a single person, human being. There's not much I can do. But Lord, come the day, if he beats Ukraine and he starts moving towards other places, which he will, because he is mad, he is ruthless, and he wants it all, I just hope that we as a country never find ourselves in a position that Ukraine has found themselves in, begging a government like our government to help us, because I totally believe they failed. Priti Patel has, and if you want to do it in votes, I'll give her -0, right down to the minus, that the weather is going to hit over the next 2 nights, where then poor people are huddled together. Mothers, babies, it's horrendous. Just be human. We need to take this control out of what Putin is going to do next.
All right, Helen. Thanks for that. That's the difficulty, is to know what to do in order to achieve that. How do you take control out of Vladimir Putin's hands? It would presumably have to come from within. And you would think that at some point, I mean, there's so many stories of Russian soldiers downing arms and walking away I mean, their actual tactics do speak of a lack of coordination, a lack of will in some parts. I mean, you have to feel a little bit of sympathy for some of the Russian soldiers who are essentially teenagers in uniforms who thought that they were going to go on a training trip, and after they'd signed on the line, they found that wasn't actually in their future at all. So they're a bit stunned to be there in some parts. And some of the Russian soldiers got shot at by their own side when they were trying to help, Ukrainian people out of dangerous situations. So, but it is difficult to know how this can actually be resolved in any way, other than somebody in Russia close to Vladimir Putin decides, right, okay, that's it, enough. Because if it does go nuclear, absolutely nobody wins. That's the end of human civilization as we know it. It's almost an end of the species thing. The lucky people will die straight away. Neaston. Hello, Lloyd.
Hi, Nick. How are you doing?
Good, thanks.
I'm really, really enjoying the show. I'm so grateful that you had that American war veteran guy on. Because some of the things that he was saying, it just seems so real, but I hear people get shouted down when they say, like the normal people like me, if I rang up and said what he said or alluded to some of the stuff, I just get shouted down.
Well, like what?
Like some of the stuff he said was just like what Peter Hitchens said or Henry Kissinger said, or like Noam Chomsky, like, this could have been avoided. There is no need for this. This is so horrible. It's like America and England or certain countries playing a game, but in the middle they're watching madness happen, but not on their doorstep. It just seems like a proxy war going on.
But it's not a proxy war. And saying that this need never have happened achieves absolutely nothing.
But I think that's part of it. Like, if you acknowledge that, then you acknowledge that it can be stopped. It can be that the big boys need to get up and talk and say, stop it. It needs to be stopped.
Well, who would be the big boys in that scenario?
I don't know. I really don't know. But I'm listening to people say things like they're going to fight to the last man. They're going to fight to the last drop of blood. And then I'm hearing, the Russian economy is tanking. I'm thinking, well, what about the Ukrainian economy? That must be like, are we going to sit back and watch like this whole drag out till it just gets flattened? Each area just gets flattened while everyone's talking about no-fly zones. But he's flattening the country. Normal paint, like I'm a painter. So I'm thinking there must be loads of painters and mechanics. They just want to crack on. They don't want to get involved in all this nonsense. But the guy said, people keep talking about a no-fly thing. Let's make the deal. Make the deal. When Peter hit, I listen to LBC all the time. So views like that you don't really hear. I heard Ian Dale on Question Time, and I heard Pete, and he likes to shout people down. I know he's not here to defend himself, but Peter Hitching said quite what he said. Nobody on the panel interrupted him or said anything. That's when he named Noam Chomsky, Henry Kissinger. They all said it's ridiculous. Way before. I didn't realise, so I looked up all this stuff. When Peter Hitching on the programme said, Nick, and I couldn't believe this, I remember when Obama said something about we would be last in line for a deal if we came out of Brexit. Yeah. And the Brexit people freaked out. How dare him interfere? Peter Hitching said that.
Well, it perhaps wasn't interfering. It was just stating a fact. I mean, it does appear as though two presidents later we are last in the queue as far as the trade deal with America is concerned.
Because he's going to deal with a big bloc as opposed to a small country.
Yeah, of course.
That's business. But Peter Hitching said Victoria Nuland went to Ukraine and encouraged a revolution that overthrew a legitimate government. I thought he was going to get shouted down. No one on the panel said anything. So I looked it up. I saw this woman in the street giving out sandwiches to people in a revolution, encouraging it. A big shot from America. I'm thinking, what would we say if that happened over here?
Right. Okay. But essentially, you're saying let's give Vladimir just to stop this in its tracks. Let's give Vladimir Putin what he wants, which is a regime change. But this is all predicated upon believing what Vladimir Putin says. I mean, this is what people like, the ones that you just described. They will say, well, the way to finish this is to just give Vladimir Putin what he wants. I mean, and they'll say, well, it's not completely unreasonable. He wants a buffer between Russia and NATO. He wants a regime change, which is more Russia-friendly. He wants the demilitarization of Ukraine. Just give him it, and then he'll stop the shelling. But that presupposes that Vladimir Putin is actually being honest about what he wants, and not demanding things that he knows he can't get in order to give him justification to continue what he's doing. Thanks for that, Lloyd. 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Email nicka@lbc.co.uk. And if you're on Twitter, it's @LBC. 12:30 on LBC, the news headlines with Serena Farrow.
This is LBC with Nick Abbott.
0345 6060 973. Helen texts, my mother was a Polish World War II orphan refugee. She lived in a Polish community in Nissen huts in a wood in Berkshire. All the able adults found work. They all talk fondly about those times. The times were hard, but they were together and they were safe. I must say I would much prefer that. If I was fleeing a country and had to end up in another, I would prefer to be in a community of people that had gone through a similar experience, people from my homeland. That's part of the human condition. That's what we prefer, obviously. I mean, I would be enormously grateful if some random stranger opened their home to me and my family, but I would prefer to be in a community. That just makes sense to me. And that is the government's answer, hastily cobbled together, desperate answer to this problem, seems just risible, really. Is that all they've got? It also, like I said before, it seems to be almost an attack. Oh, okay, you really care about the refugees. Well, righto, then you put them up in your home. That kind of idea. Nah, you don't like them so much now, do you? Unless I'm getting it wrong, in which case you can correct me. Brixton, hello, Doris.
Sorry, I just had to laugh about that last comment because I was actually trying to concentrate on what I was going to talk about in the first place. But after I've heard so many people's views, right, I might sound a bit ignorant, but if it does go to an extent of where it does become a bit Pete Tong kind of thing, you know, and we end up having to leave our country, what happens then? That's what I wanted to know.
France would be the nearest place to get to.
France?
And perhaps they'll push us back out to sea.
Sorry. All right, all respect you, because I watched the war and what they do show you, and it has brought tears to my eyes, and I was even at the contemplation of saying I'd put up a woman and her children and whatever. But then I thought, then I'll be implicating myself then, isn't it?
How do you mean? Implicating?
Like, you are implicating yourself. It's like you're joining something. Now, supposing this man wants to decide with his biological warfare that he wants to try and get everybody after they've left the country, and like you were saying about put them all in one community, that would make it a lot easier for him to do. So you'd only have to send somebody in there with some kind of biological something on them, and it will spread to them, innit?
Well, that's... I hadn't even considered that, Doris. It just got worse.
You've never considered that?
No, just when you think it couldn't get worse, it just did. Thanks for that. 0345 6060 973. Rose texts, maybe I'm being over-cynical, but I fear those in power right now are more interested in protecting their own positions, as in the votes that were anti-migrants, etc. They've been terrible regarding the refugees so far, and very backwards, and I sadly think this is a huge part of their calculations. Overprivileged politicians protecting their own skins still do not seem to be able to view the needs of those in trouble, only to punish those that are better off than them. Better off than them. Worse off than them, I think you mean. Hornchurch. Sujid.
Hi there.
Hello.
I just wanted to echo some of your listeners actually said there. I think the process, asylum process they have actually installed now is actually it's literally stopping people to come into the country. It's actually deliberately done.
Yeah.
If that's the case, they should be transparent about it. I think just taking the mickey out of these people, it's not the nicest way to do these things. And secondly, I think Priti Patel is the most heartless person, and he has no compassion whatsoever, even though she is the daughter of an asylum seeker. So I just find that, amusing that, they took full advantage of the situation, now stopping the same people coming through.
Yeah. Well, it seems to be, everything that the government does seems to be guided by the principle, what would Donald Trump do? And Donald Trump would put into the position of somebody whose job it is to care for others, somebody with no compassion. That's exactly what Donald Trump would do. And that's precisely what this government appears to have done. I mean, Priti Patel appears to be compassionless. I laughed out loud listening to Ian Dale the other day. He said that in private, Priti Patel's a very nice person. Okay, I can imagine a lot. I can imagine dinosaurs roaming across the face of the earth. I can imagine the existence of an invisible space wizard, which has control over all of us. But I can't imagine Priti Patel being nice in person. Thanks, Sujit. Bristol, Max.
Hi, Nick. Good evening. What I'm concerned with is, and perhaps I'm rather naive, but I think that the world's full of good people. And is there any means, perhaps by the World Service or whatever, that the Russian people can be made aware of anything other than the propaganda that they've been fed on?
Yeah, I wonder how difficult it is to get information there. There was talk of a Russian television program, apparently a popular talk show on TV in Russia, and they actually strayed from the Kremlin line and said, do we really want to get bogged down in another Afghanistan, and it's even worse than that, and we should just end it. So perhaps some sort of message came through there. But even if they don't get the news from the outside, then they will get these sort of people think they're superficial and pointless sanctions, like not having rock bands play there, and not having the Bolshoi Ballet play here, and taking closing up the Burberry store, and having football games cancelled, and so on. And it's difficult to talk your way around, to propagandise your way around those things. I mean, if Marks and Spencer's isn't there anymore, then that's something you're going to notice if you are, used to getting your pants in there or whatever. So you'd think that the message will get through eventually, that something is indeed up, and I just wonder whether the Russians can sort of lie their way successfully around such massive sanctions. And of course, people who sent their kids away, which is essentially what these troops appear to be, teenagers, families have sent their teenagers away on what they thought was a training exercise, and they're not coming back. So they're going to notice that too. Thanks, Max. 0345 6060 973. I mean, it is fairly easy to get around if you ban people from the internet in one country, you can quite easily go through another country by using a VPN, or I'm sure other methods are available if you're computer literate. I just wonder what level of sort of closure the Russian authorities have managed to achieve in regards to messages coming in from the outside, getting news from external sources. Don't know. Greenwich. Hello, Dean.
Hello. Good morning to you.
Yes, Dean.
Right. What I was just saying to your colleague who took the call initially, Volodymyr Zelensky.
Yeah.
Very nice guy. Very comedian, lovely, very passionate. The way he's...
Where do you go? Mobile phones. They just can't make calls yet. They're working on it. I'll try and get you back. John texts, you cannot just let any people stay in your home. You need a gas certificate, a fire safety certificate, a 5-year electrical certificate, all appliances PAT tested, furniture, fire and safety materials, not to mention planning permission for a B&B. I don't think it would count as a B&B. Josie texts, we could house refugees in official residences like Liz Truss's. Install computers to do visas if that's necessary. We built Nightingale hospitals in days. That's right. How many people could you get to stay in a Nightingale hospital, for instance? It's just a big tent. Maidstone. Hello, Richard.
Hi, good evening.
Richard.
What I was thinking, really, firstly, it was about housing Ukrainians, really. I think it's really we should think about more about just looking by instead of going and helping them. And I think the best course of action would be, I'll probably totally wrong, but in my opinion, would be to send troops in there and call his bluff. And because they're standing by needing help from people. And then I know everyone's worried about nuclear stuff, but I don't think you do it anyway. And they don't want to nuke. They don't want to nuke themselves, do they? So, and then I think what happened then, we'll send troops in, and then Putin looks silly, and then he'll get overruled by that, by this military disaster. But yeah, it's about having a bit of strength to do it, really. That's I mean, it may not be a good idea, but you got that.
Yeah, well, I mean, our next move is predicated on the idea, on the notion that Vladimir Putin is or is not sane. Will or will not spark global thermonuclear war, which will be the end of civilization as we know it. There's really no coming back from it. God, there's this frightening Twitter feed that was on online today about what the consequences of America and Russia using half of their arsenal. At this time of night, best not to look it up, but it's not good. Everything goes. Everything. Is Vladimir Putin actually that crazy to end the world just to save face? 0345 6060 973. Lingfield. Hello, Maria. Oh, Maria. Gone. Maybe it's something to do with that line.
Can you hear me?
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes,
I'm
Maria.
Here.
Hi, Maria.
Hello. All right. I just wanted to make the point, Nick, that I've been listening night after night at different times and everything. And the first point I wanted to make is that from a woman's point of view, okay, to the women we have in our government at this moment in time, I'm a mother, carer, grandmother, God knows what, a daughter, everything that my gender has, every role that my gender has put on me, I've done. And I've done it with caring and compassion, and I've done it with the best of my ability. Now, unfortunately, Priti Patel, I've ever come across. But then having said that, I've had to have dealings with the other person in charge of our sick and our vulnerable in this country, Theresa Coffey. Their punitive policies and the way that they manage the vulnerable, the sick, the asylum seekers, the refugees, is just, it is the nasty party back. And Theresa May was right to say that back then. And as for Liz Truss, I look at that lady's face and I think, are you there? Are the lights actually really on with your compassion? What are you actually doing about these women and children standing in -7? Nick, I'd be dead in 10 minutes standing at -7. I really would. I would. How are these people doing? How are these people surviving? And I was listening to a show last night, on your shows last night, and an elderly gentleman phoned in last night, and he said something about the airlift in Berlin that they did in the Second World War, and I thought that, why can't we do that? And as you say, we knocked up these Nightingale hospitals in a nanosecond. We mobilised our army into helping people get jabs in arms. What is going on with this government? And from a woman's point of view, it is, I say personally myself, be afraid with the women that we have got looking after our sick and vulnerable at this moment in time in government. They are the coldest fish and with the most punitive attitudes towards other human beings. That's just all I wanted to point out. Great show, Nick.
Thanks, Maria. 0345 6060 973. Nick Abbott, LBC.
This is LBC with Nick Abbott. Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850.
0345 6060 973. Grant texts, I'm sure our government are controlling our media and not showing us just how bad the situation is. If we knew and saw the full extent, more British people would put pressure on our government to get involved and help. Well, I'm not sure that's true. I mean, we know that they bombed a maternity hospital and a disabled care home. We saw the pictures. I mean, I have avoided the most gruesome coverage, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And I would recommend that you don't go down that hole yourself. But I'm not sure that the government are actually softening the blow for us. I think we can see it quite clearly. Sheila texts, you're right, refugees will want the company of their countrymen, country persons, Sheila. Hammersmith. Hello, Margaret.
Hi.
Margaret.
Yes. I heard the lady complaining about the attitude of British government towards refugees, but few people know about the Polish government attitude towards helping refugees who come across, and there's now over 1 million of them. Polish government is not involved in any way helping those people. It's only private people, private citizens, and their empathy and caring and trying to help and do everything. And these people are going to private homes because there is no involvement of and help from government. European Union offered some financial help, I believe, but they're not going to give it to the central government. They say they're going to give to the charities, to the people who are caring and who need the money, but they're not going to give the Polish government. They say that they could organize army to help to cook for these people, to provide food, but they're not involved in any way. My sister tomorrow is going to help peel potatoes because there's a convoy of orphans arrived in the area, and there is absolutely no help from Polish government, and it's absolutely terrible.
Right. And
Yeah.
are you Polish?
Yes,
Right.
yes. And very people, because I wasn't aware of that fact. I'm listening you with one ear and watching television with the other, listening to everything. And I was not aware of that fact until they sent me YouTube, and I believe my family, they're not lying to me. They absolutely lost for words. And I heard this from other people, and my eyes opened now.
Right. So it's your family in Poland that have told you that?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thanks for that, Margaret. 0345 6060 973. Greenwich. Dean.
Hello, sir.
Yes, Dean.
Right, what I was saying earlier about Zelensky, she's a lovely, lovely gentleman. The world loved the guy. Honest, decent, passionate person. However, he is not a politician, and that's his weakness. Being honest and good and decent is not enough, and I think he got played by America, possibly Britain, in the fact that they promise help, which, honestly, they're helping, but not in the way he was expecting. And I think he took on Putin with the expectation to have more support.
Well, he didn't take on Putin. He just reacted to an invasion.
He probably would have taken a different approach to the threat of invasion based on how his capabilities were. And in this situation, he misjudged the situation completely, because at the moment, he's crying out for help with the closing the airspace and other help, which it just wasn't happening because the West wasn't planning on offering that level of support.
But
he didn't realize
his initial reaction wasn't based on that, because they didn't have that conversation. His initial reaction to become the person that we are all impressed by was not based on his understanding of what the West's reaction would be. It was just an instinctual reaction to an invasion of his country.
But he was, since the 2014 invasion, annexation, he was promised lots of support from even America. And he was expecting more than he's getting. And that is why now he's screaming out, because he knew he wasn't in the position to take on Russia and to challenge Russia, because that was just a terrible mistake. And now he's sort of living that nightmare, and he's not getting the help. So I think this is an opportunity where the West, Putin has always been an enemy of the West. We know that. And it's a brilliant strategy if it is played out that way, where they're actually using Ukraine as the bait to bring down Russia by sanctioning and breaking the country as they're doing. Brilliant strategy, but I think Ukraine is going to come out very, very badly in all of this, and they did not see that coming.
Right.
And
when you say very badly, do you mean their reputation or just the fabric of their country? Right.
The country.
Right, okay. All right. Thanks, Dean. I've got to get at least one more call in before the end. Bromley. Hello, Joe.
Hello, mate. You said earlier on, do you remember? You said earlier on, they're sending the children, the Russians I'm talking about now, the conscripts, they said they never did. The Russian mothers are now saying, where's my boy, where's my boy? They're coming back in body bags.
Well,
Russians thought...
They're not coming back at all.
Well, okay. The fact is quite simply this, that Russia thought it was going to go in, they were going to be laudably appraised, they were going to have roses thrown at them, champagne flowing. The next thing on top of that was, of course, he thought, well, if we're going to go in and it's going to be that easy, send in the children. What rubbish have we got? Get all the old tanks lined up, send them in as well. It's a show of force, right? That's all we need to do. Show force, and it's going to be simple. It's not been simple. God bless Ukraine. Those men and women are fighting their hearts and souls out, and we are not doing enough to help them. It's as simple as that. Russia only knows one thing: brute force. It knows nothing else. They have lied from the beginning. They will continue to lie, and thousands more people are going to die because of it. It's absolutely insane, disgusting, unforgivable, and the West needs to do more.
All right. Thanks, Joe. I'll be back tonight at 10 o'clock. Steve Allen is here from 4, but first, it's Clyde Ball.
Nick, thank you. And coming up after the news, as Russian troops close in surrounding the capital, Kiev, how possible is it for citizen soldiers to fight off the approach of a full-time army? I'll be talking to an expert in urban warfare about that and taking your calls. The UK has finally got tougher on oligarchs, but is this sort of sanction really effective? Who do these measures really hurt? We'll ask, is Russia about to cut itself off from the internet? And we'll be looking at the impact of the Ukraine conflict on energy prices and our energy policy in this country. Plus a look as well at the Saturday front pages. And if you want to join in at any point, 0345 6060 973.
On your radio, on Global Player, and...
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 1 o'clock, the Ministry of Defence, 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 the Ministry of Defence,